Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. And I am Judge Richard Weinberg. Welcome back to our audience. So, Jesse, I want to begin this week by talking about presidential politics. And the big issue, it seems to me, about presidential politics is you have two gentlemen, Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, and it raises the issue to me of, can America do better? And in this time of crisis, shouldn't we be doing better? Which is a corollary to that is the large issue, which even the New York Times has now started to recognize, which is the age issue. Certainly it holds real concern for Mr. Biden, less so for Mr. Trump, who seems to have all his faculties and his physical health in place. Certainly it raises the issue with Senator Feinstein of California, and it clearly raises the issue of Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania. But I think the country has to do better because we're under siege. As you and I have discussed, internally and externally, we're under siege. We're not doing well. The momentum is against us. We need strong, decisive leadership. Things are moving very quickly. And we have a couple more years of Biden's presidency, and he's just announced that he's running again. And I believe that he's unqualified by dint of personal character and his bad performance to be the president. And I think he shouldn't run for those reasons. But this serious issue is it time to tell these people, these 80-year-olds or these late 70-year-olds, that it's time to get off the stage and make way for a new generation of leadership? What do you say about that?
I think it's not about ageism, but I think you pointed it out. It's about being impaired. It's about being able to do the job. It's about being competent. I think that the three Democrats that you had discussed, Senator Feinstein, President Biden, and Senator Fetterman, I think for a variety of reasons, maybe no fault of their own, maybe just health issues and such as that, they are not doing any justice or any goodwill for their constituencies, whether it's the president or whether it's the constituency of California and certainly the constituency of Pennsylvania. And I think that it is time for them, because we have a number of different people. I don't think age is really an issue anymore. You know, we have a number of issues of individuals. You spoke about President Trump, former President Trump. He is someone who is in his mid-70s, as you said, is in good health, has his faculties, is very direct. We may not like his approach, but he is very sound in articulating his vision for America and for policy. I think that what we're having here is we have Democrats holding on to power. We saw it during the Fetterman Senate race where they sequestered him for a period of time, never spoke about his health, never spoke about his capability. He had a stroke during the middle of the campaign, and they really duped the people of Pennsylvania. Because now he has just returned, and, you know, my heart breaks for him. I mean, I'm a human being first. I don't want to see him struggling and such. I believe that this is not really what he maybe wants to do or his family wants to do, endure. The same for Senator Feinstein and President Biden. But this is the power brokers of the Democratic Party who want to hold on to the vestiges of the power that they currently have. They don't want to cede any power. And here it is. When it comes to the next generation, we have had next generation leaders that have broken through and laid out a plan for America, laid out a plan for our states. and they've been successful in doing it, both Republicans and Democrats, but I'm more partial to the Republican Party. I mean, you look at individuals like this harkens back to when I was like 14 years old, and I really started paying attention to President Reagan's first run for president, real run when he was the nominee in 1980. They were questioning his competency and his vigor and his age. But certainly he demonstrated that he was more than up for the job. He did that over the last 8 years. We remember when they had the summit with the Soviet Union. He certainly came out far more energized than his counterpart. So I don't think it's really ageism or the age. It's the fact that the Democratic power brokers will not cede any power. And I think that they're stifling the Democratic newcomers that are banging on the door. And for us as Americans, I think we got to be happy for that. I don't want to turn into California. I don't want to see the policies of Governor Newsom in California be strung out across the United States and push us more farther to the left and to socialism. So I think it comes down to, can you do the job? Are you competent? And maybe President Trump is right. Let's have a bit of a competency test. Let's make sure they were up for the job, because this is not about ego. This is not about pride. It's the future of America.
Well, I think you said it right, Jesse. And to the extent that people listening think that I have something against people of a certain age, I don't. I have a problem with people.
I know you don't.
I mean, I'm reaching that age too. But the fact of the matter is, if I thought that I was...
You're competent. You have your faculties. You should run for office again.
No, I've had it. I've had a very good career, thankfully, by being appointed, never having to run for anything. And I'm just absolutely satisfied with that. And so people over the years said, why don't you run for this? Why don't you run for that? I said, no, just keep appointing me. I'm doing just fine being appointed. So I've had a good career being appointed. But I will tell you this, if I don't think every day that I was ready to do the job and give 110%, and I didn't have the physical ability to do it and the mental capacity, I would think it would be a moral lapse on my part to stay in the game. I would just step off. I would step off the stage and not get involved. Let somebody who's more vigorous, has more mental and physical capacity to do the job. And the stakes couldn't be more important, because the enemies against this country are united. The axis of evil that you and I keep talking about is getting stronger. As we talk, the foreign minister of Russia has gone to Latin America. We've been visiting 3 or 4 different countries about putting military bases there, but not just military bases, but putting nuclear missiles there. We're talking about the total abolition of the Monroe Doctrine. We're talking about a recitation of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which well. We don't want these people to have nuclear weapons at a stone's throw to our cities. We don't want to have that. People will say to me, well, what difference does it make whether it comes from Moscow or it comes from Cuba or Venezuela? It makes a big difference, because the response time to stop it, to intersect the nuclear weapons, the difference between having a half hour versus having 15 minutes is a big deal. So the military people will tell you that. And when we interview them on Katz and Cosby, they're very, very clear. It matters a lot to keep them out of the hemisphere. And you need somebody who's tough, who's strong, who's perceived to be tough and strong to fight to protect America. And Biden has not shown that ability. Now, let's switch to Feinstein. Now, Dianne Feinstein, former mayor of San Francisco, many years United States Senator, a distinguished woman, a liberal, but smart and tough, and she knew her business. She's not up to the game anymore. Now, it turns out that works very nicely for the Senate Republicans, because they can stymie some of the agenda that Schumer's trying to push. So from a partisan point of view, it's just swell having her there, or having Fetterman in a hospital for a long period of time, because they couldn't push their agenda. But that's not what we need. This country needs the best, the brightest, the most vigorous, the most capable, the most moral people. And having a Feinstein or Fetterman in the Senate does not do that. Having a Biden as president doesn't do that. And I want to talk about the dishonesty of the Democratic Party, my party. They ran somebody in the last presidential election who they knew was not up to the game, but they ran him anyway. They hit him in the basement. They get him taping. He did limited appearances. He didn't do press conferences. They prepped him up for a couple of debates and then brought him back to the basement. They don't worry about the public reaction because as long as you get him on tape, he's fine. But you put him in front of a live audience, he's not. He misspeaks. He doesn't understand basic facts, doesn't understand the history of what he's done himself. This is a problem. You can't have that perception because the enemies of this country look at us and they say, this guy is ripe for the pickings. And to foster this ticket of Biden and Harris again on the American people because they think that Trump is going to be a weaker candidate and that he's the only one that can beat Trump is awful. What say you?
I think that the case of the matter is that the best thing for America is that they are running and they think that they are going to be beating anybody. I think that one of the things we have learned is that we should not ever doubt or consider out and done with, Trump or any other Republican that may come forward. But we're speaking here about Donald Trump because one of the things that we have in our favor is that the people are living every day the failed policies of these Democratic left socialists, whether it's Biden, Feinstein, Fetterman, Hochul. You run down the line here through New York and our country. We don't feel safe in our streets. Small businesses are now locking up and securing their inventory so they can prevent the
shoplifting,
burglaries and such, and the smash and bang burglaries. They are anti-cop. They're anti-public safety. They're citizen, but they're pro-criminal, and that's the problem. That's just in one area. The way we are dealing with inflation, they want to tout a drop in inflation when it's still higher than it was several years ago, certainly higher than it was during the Trump administration, and even gas is still higher than the years of the Trump administration. And what do they decide to do? They want to double down on their failed policies, and we've discussed it throughout this area. The Green New Deal is a farce right now. It's a soundbite that far exceeds the science, and that's a mistake that's going to cost Americans more. Now, I believe that my party has to do a better job at communicating and articulating the differences between these policies, common sense Republican policies, and those of the Democratic far left socialist agenda. We need to talk about our personal rights, our public safety, our ability to be entrepreneurs in a capitalistic society, for parents to have a voice in their education of their children, as opposed to having their children indoctrinated by some bureaucratic left agenda. That's going to be the true difference in this race and the failures of the Biden administration. Because any president or any leader, whether you're a senator, a mayor, or member of Congress, a supervisor, or county executive, you're only as good as the staff that's around you. And one thing that we have demonstrated here in the last 2+ years of the Biden administration is that his staff is not up to snuff. His staff is a mockery. They're inept. They were the ones that suggested, counseled on ill-fated plans like the Afghanistan withdrawal that we spoke about extensively last week, and economic policies that have driven this country into a near recession and have driven us into the arms of our enemies by not making us any more energy independent. A perfect example is shutting down the Keystone Pipeline.
Well, what about raiding the strategic reserves, the strategic oil reserves? And so when you really have an emergency when you need it, he just did that to lower the prices. But the fact is, when you replenish it, you have to replenish it at a higher price because oil is escalated, and the Saudis and the OPEC people, Iran and Russia, with their oil production, want $100 oil. And $100 oil, when it has to be replaced, you have to pay for it. So that increases our national debt. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. If we deliberately wanted to be self-destructive, we couldn't do a better job. Kevin has given us a sign, Jesse. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay tuned. We'll be back for more interesting conversation in just a moment.
This is Let the Record Show.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and my good friend, esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse, you know, you can't make this stuff up. It's almost like a made-for-television movie on cable. This IRS whistleblower has talked about, from a different vantage point now, as an insider, talking about the cover-up, the protection, the shield against the allegations of Biden family corruption. What is Biden family corruption? The allegations are that for many decades, the Biden family has been self-dealing, influence peddling, making money out of the connections that Joe Biden, whether as a senator or vice president or even president of the United States, has made money influence peddling. Whether it's true and correct, I don't know. You don't know. But there's serious allegations. Serious people have made them. There seems to be documentary evidence. You have the whole issue of the Biden laptop, which was documentary evidence. You had the intelligence community, which we'll get to in a minute, and the game they played with that. But right now, we know that for years and years and years, there's been a U.S. attorney named Weiss in Delaware who was a Trump appointee kept on to investigate Hunter Biden and the family connections about influence peddling and making money through China, through Russia, through Ukraine, other places as well, and the failure to do true and accurate tax payment or tax reporting, as well as false statements on gun applications. I will tell you, as a former prosecutor and as a former judge, Jesse, it doesn't take 5 years to get a case presented to a grand jury and have them vote a true bill or no true bill and have it disposed of. And it turns out that Weiss is told, and Weiss is the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, has asked the Justice Department for clearance because the jurisdiction has to be, because the crimes were committed while Biden, alleged crimes were committed while Biden Jr., Hunter Biden, was not living in Delaware, so they have to go to the states where he lived to get the authorization. Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, a former very distinguished judge in the United States Court of Appeals, has said, there's full cooperation. This guy Weiss can go anywhere he wants to go, get the full cooperation. And now what's happening is this whistleblower has demonstrated clearly that is far from correct, and there may be a real cover-up going on that has not allowed Weiss to go to these other U.S. attorneys who have turned him down to get the information that they need and to go forward. What say you?
This is, the same old Democratic playbook. Do as I say, not as I do. They criticize President Trump and other Republicans for manipulating, politicizing the Department of Justice and other governmental agencies, when it's truly them that have imparted themselves as part of the deep state here in this government that really truly tries to run the government. I mean, think about it. This is the Department of Justice that says one thing publicly, but in all actuality is doing another behind the scenes in back rooms. And that's not good for America. That's not good for the confidence that the American people are going to have in the institutional operations of our government, agencies of our government. Mark Lytle, the attorney for the IRS whistleblower, wrote to lawmakers and said that his client has information, quote, on the failure to mitigate clear conflicts of interest in the ultimate disposition, close quote, of a criminal investigation into the younger Biden's taxes and other things. This is despite serious risk of retaliation to his client, and he's offering to provide the Congress with information necessary to exercise their constitutional oversight and function. This is important. This is, if their roles were reversed, Trump was in office and it was his administration, the news media, the legacy media would all be there at the gates, trying to burn the house down, going time after time after time after the president. But because he's a Democrat, it seems like it's a whole different ballgame, that everyone is circling the wagons and letting a possible alleged crime and the corruption continue for the purposes of protecting the elite. It's wrong. It needs to stop, and we need to have elected officials on both sides of the aisle. But I am hoping and happy that it's the Republican majority in the House that seems to be taking this on, because it's our democracy at stake. It's our own Constitution at stake. It's our system of government at stake. And really, it's the confidence in the people in their government that's at stake here if we just continue to cover up for an elite few.
Well, the old saw is that this is a government of laws, not of men.
Exactly.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, it's perfectly clear that when Trump's hotel in Washington was rented out for events, the Washington Post and the New York Times were all over that. It was influence peddling. All right? That was a very big deal. When Justice Clarence Thomas goes on a boat with his friend who's known for 30 or 40 years, all of a sudden they want to blow him off the Supreme Court of the United States when it's perfectly kosher under the ethical rules of the United States Supreme Court. When Hunter Biden has these private sales of his so-called art and pictures of his paintings are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars and you don't know who the buyers are, it's a way of laundering money and protecting the sources of influence peddling. That should be examined. But nobody's crying out about this great artist, Hunter Biden. They're still talking about them renting a ballroom at one of the Trump hotels in Washington. So the double standard is awful because it undermines, as you correctly point out, Jesse, faith in our government, the integrity of the process. It looks like they have weaponized the investigative process, the FBI. It looks like they've weaponized the U.S. attorney's offices. It looks like the judges aren't doing the right thing in terms of how they're handling their jobs. Let me give you a perfect example. You have a very fine judge in the Southern District of New York, Judge Lewis Kaplan, who I've met. I don't know well, but I've met him at different judicial functions. A very well-respected judge. And he's presiding over this alleged defamation case springing out of an alleged rape from 30-odd years ago that Trump is claimed to have raped some woman in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room. And this goes back 30 years, and he never heard anything about it, and all of a sudden, 30 years later, it's resuscitated itself, this alleged claim, where there's no documentation, anything was ever made about a claim, and it was never gone forward on. So all of a sudden, it's back. And Trump, during the campaign, made a comment about her that this was nonsense, and she's now suing for defamation. Okay, so what does a judge do? And this is Judge Kaplan, who's a very fine judge, by the way. There's a famous tape, which I think was an ugly tape. It was a stupid tape, and Trump acted inappropriately, where he's on the record, and it was they call it Access Hollywood, a show I never watched. The only reason I even know the name is because during the campaign they kept showing it and showing and showing. This Access Hollywood tape, where he made a misogynist comment about grabbing a woman by her intimate parts. Okay? That was stupid. That was despicable. As a father of daughters, as having a female as a mother, and my wife is a female, I find it disrespectful. I think it's awful. And he did it. And he apologized for it, and he should move on. But now the prosecution, in this case the plaintiff's lawyer, say, we want that tape in before the jury. Now, I had this discussion last night with Alan Dershowitz in Katz and Cosby, Professor Dershowitz of Harvard, one of the great lawyers of our time, one of the great professors of our time. And Alan and I discussed it. This has no value at all, has no evidentiary value that he may have said something in a tape, whether or not there was a rape or not. The prejudice is outstanding, and yet this judge is allowing it into evidence. That is wrong, absolutely wrong. Judges have to be scrupulously careful to make sure there's a fair and level playing field. And if Judge Kaplan lets this in, whether it's in the case in chief, in the plaintiff's case, or as cross-examination, it should not be in there. It has nothing to do with whether Trump is guilty of this alleged sexual assault against this woman. So we have to be very, very careful about how the system plays out, because the people, as you correctly point out, Jesse, look at it and they say it's not a fair playing field. There's a double standard. Some people are taken to task and some people are protected. And that's what this whole situation with the IRS whistleblower is about, Jesse. Are they protecting the Bidens? And we need to know the answer to that. Now, let's switch gears, because I want to talk to you about something else that I consider absolutely reprehensible. And I'm talking about, this is a tale, Jesse, of the abuse of the intelligence community during the 2020 presidential campaign. Now, it's now turned out that Michael Morell, who's a deputy CIA director, and Blinken, who's now the Secretary of State, was deeply involved, Blinken, that is, deeply involved in the 2020 campaign for the Biden group. They chased up this famous 51 signature intelligence expert letter. And what did that letter say, Jesse? Letter said that the Hunter Biden allegations that Hunter Biden was acting in corrupt ways and influence peddling, that had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. You remember that, Jesse?
Yes, I do.
All the earmarks, Russian disinformation. And Biden got on the stage and he waved the letter and he said, Trump's allegations about this, absolute nonsense. I have this letter, shows that 51 people, professional intelligence people, saying this has all the earmarks of disinformation from the Russians, and therefore it's not credible. And people voted the way they voted. After it was later revealed that this Biden laptop was true and correct and accurate and was a real deal, people have been polled and they said they would have voted differently. So that was the real election fraud, because Biden got up on the stage knowing that his people had chased down this specious, spurious letter which changed the course of American history. What say you?
What I say is I'm astonished, because on this show, many, if not all, of those 51 signatories have now forgotten or do not recall the exact text of the letter. They did not realize or were aware of what the letter said. They recant what was in the letter because the cover-up that they were participating in has been exposed. It's been pulled back. And now we're seeing the truth as it goes forward. I believe that this is a travesty placed on the American people. I believe that the intelligence community, which is supposed to be a tool for national security, security within our borders, security to maintain our borders, was abused and played a role in truly gerrymandering an election result. And they did it by providing a false tool to a presidential candidate, in this case, Joe Biden. It was also, I believe, a tool used by big tech to help censor the original outstanding, now confirmed reporting of the New York Post on the role of the Bidens. And the fact that two high-ranking members, one of them being the Secretary of State, is involved, still in the government, was involved in that abuse or that election gerrymandering is subject for is reason enough for a resignation and an appointment of a new individual. If you're going to get the job based on a lie, and you're going to conduct that job, always knowing that the lie is there and possibly continuing that lie. And maybe our listeners are wondering, well, why is Hunter Biden's business dealings or his taxes so important? Let's lower gas. Let's lower inflation. Let's give cops more tools instead of criminals. I guess the reason being here, and it was the Democrats in creating a false narrative after the 2016 elections have put it on the forefront when they put forward this, Russia collusion narrative that was been, debunked, is that a foreign power or any power, business or otherwise, that has the ability to squeeze a member of the presidential family will basically hold that entire family and the nation possibly hostage to its whims and its desires and its agenda. And it places us in a dark, deep, unsafe place. So, I mean, you could probably, Your Honor, articulate this even far better than I, but that is the problem we're dealing with here. And what happens? The legacy media, the mainstream media, the big tech partners of our Democratic donors, the Soros of the world, and the Democratic power brokers, they all join together. They build a circle to defend their fort, which is the beacon of power here in the United States.
Well, that's very well said. Look, this is the problem. Morell was part of the whole issue of the 2016 campaign with Russian collusion. He was part of the cover-up of the Benghazi situation where Hillary Clinton went out there with Susan Rice, and they said, oh, this was all because of they had some videotape that outraged the community, which was absolute nonsense. All those people lost their lives in the Benghazi attack. They didn't send the troops in time to help these people. The people lost their lives because of that. And then they went out there with Susan Rice and Clinton saying, what difference does it make? It was a tape. It's all nonsense, total nonsense. And Morell was part of that. So Morell was part of the Benghazi situation, the Russian collusion fiasco, and the most recent situation that we're talking about in 2020 about the so-called Hunter Biden Russian disinformation. So Morell is up to his eyeballs in guilt with this stuff. And neither he nor Blinken should ever hold a position of responsibility again in our government. And those 51 signatories, they shouldn't hold position either, because you don't sign a letter like that without doing your due diligence. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation. We'll be right back.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes, my gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse, I want to switch gears with you, and I want to talk about the latest attack by the Biden administration, part of their Green New Deal sweep, to radically change how we get energy in this country by proposing through their EPA, which they control through an agency regulation, imposing stringent standards which cannot be met with respect to carbon emissions. And so they're giving the automobile manufacturers a choice. Either meet these stringent standards or cut your production down of gas-powered cars and increase your production of electric cars. Now, think about that. They are distorting free choice from consumers. You have 81% of the people in the United States, Jesse, want to keep their gas-powered cars. And if they were going out to shop for a car, they want to get a gas-powered car. They don't want an electric car. And yet the EPA is going to force this through a government regulation. Now, I've been talking to various state attorneys general across the country, and I think there's going to be litigation on this. But it shows you the sweeping power of the fourth branch of government, the deep state of the administrative agencies, how they can totally remake the energy map of this country, not by an act of Congress, signed by a president of the United States, not open to open speech and debate and public hearings, but fundamentally to sneak it through rulemaking where you have admittedly a public comment period, but nobody pays attention to public comment periods, and it goes right through. And when it's passed, historically, through an agency, the courts are inclined to defer to the so-called expertise of the federal agencies. It's ridiculous because there's no expertise here that shows that this is warranted to put gas-powered cars out of business and to force manufacturers to have gas-powered cars. What say you?
It's absolutely wrong. This is nothing more than a Soviet-era theology where bureaucrats are making you, the citizen, choose to purchase something that they don't want. 81% of the people do not want these cars. But here's the case. Right now, I believe that about 7% of new car sales are EV, electric vehicles. And the balance of that, roughly 68% of those car sales are gas-powered. In between those, there are hybrids. The Biden administration wants to foot those numbers, and they're doing it by forcing manufacturers. And we talked about this a little bit last week with Eric Levine, I believe. I don't understand why
last week was Rita Cosby. The week before was Eric Levine.
I apologize.
We have an all-star guest list, so
yes, I know. The star-studded, and we're just here. But I think what is going is that you're basically telling someone to do something that they don't want to do. That is just wrong. It's with the Soviet Union. It's not. It's anti-capitalistic society. It's, again, the government telling you something that you don't want to do. It's forcing you to do it. And I wonder why the big automakers are falling in line. And we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. It's either one way or one thing or another. It's either the carrot somewhere along the line in these policies. They're going to be getting additional monies to offset the huge costs of the manufacturing of these vehicles and the marketing of these vehicles and the maintenance of these vehicles, or, which is even more dire and scarier, they're going to use a stick, and they're going to use laws and regulations, and they're going to use inspections to try and bully these automakers into following these policies, because I can't see it happening. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I've always said, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, get a new room. But the fact of the matter is I'm smart enough to think. I know that forcing people to buy something that they don't want or they don't prefer is un-American. Number two, forcing these policies that are untested in science is a boondoggle that's going to cost consumers in higher maintenance costs, higher insurance costs, and higher sticker price costs. And on a national security issue, we are emboldening our number one enemy, China, who harvests these materials needed for these batteries in these vehicles, and they control that supply stream. We are emboldening them. We are feeding them. We are financing them by doing this. It is wrong on multiple levels. It must be stopped. Some common sense needs to pop into these individuals, or we have to hope that the legislation, that the judiciary protects us.
Well, let me give you another example that's related to this on this awesome power of these administrative agencies and these departments by rulemaking or by a presidential executive order. Now, they suffer from this delusion that wind power and solar power energy can do everything we need to keep this civilization and this economy going, which is just an absolute misrepresentation. It's a lie. It's a distortion. It's manipulation. They don't have the infrastructure to do it. They don't have the capacity to do it. It will not work. But there are also collateral costs to this, Jesse. So, for example, the Wall Street Journal in Monday's Wall Street Journal, in one of their editorials, pointed out that the new regs out there pushing forward, wind power on the oceans, wind power on the oceans, with these great gimmicks that this is the way of the future. But the fact of the matter is, these wind power generators, what are they going to do? They're going to interfere with the ability of air traffic controllers for traffic safety. They interfere with that. They interfere with communications. They interfere with national security. And it's a very serious problem. So they come up with a scheme that all of a sudden wind is going to do the answer, except there are collateral and serious costs to this wind power generation. And we're not going to, it's undermine our safety, our national security. It's going to undermine our economy. We're not going to be able to do it. And air traffic controllers are already complaining that it's interfering with their ability to make sure planes move safely. This is serious business, but yet they want to have this religious mantra, green energy, green energy, green energy. Wind and solar are the answers. It's not enough, and it has serious, dangerous, and collateral consequences. Another thing that's now being pushed, Jesse, is the war against AM radios. Now, listen, vast majority of rural areas get their communications in crisis situations, emergency situations, through AM radios. A large amount of diversity on the airwaves of points of view, whether they're cultural or political or ideological or religious. The diversity of opinion comes out because you have a countervailing voice through AM radios. Now, the car manufacturers, with an impetus from some of the government types, are trying to abolish AM radios. Now, that's going to take off an important voice and an important communication device off the radio waves. How dare they do that? In fact, 7 former heads of FEMA have said this is a disaster from a public safety emergency broadcasting perspective. What say you?
I think it's absolutely wrong. And honestly, I believe that this is once again big tech and the Biden administration suppressing different voices that attack or have a counterpoint to their policies. AM radio, as we know, is the bastion of conservative talk radio. It's where it began, it's where it flourishes, and where it continues. But more importantly, they would sacrifice, as you pointed out. 7 FEMA directors have said this is a bad idea. The National Broadcasting System, it utilizes the AM signal. It's important for the AM signal in those rural areas. God knows we can't even get Wi-Fi in this day and age to some of those areas. But they would sacrifice public safety for their own political agenda, and that's just wrong. And again, I understand maybe this is a way where the automakers who are buying into this, they want to get these whole new high-tech cars and such, and limit the weight of these cars or the
it's a money-making.
Squeeze more mileage.
No,
They're moneymakers to squeeze more mileage out of it.
It's also a money-making gambit, Jesse. If you can't listen to the AM radio, you have to pay every month for their devices.
Exactly. Whether that be a satellite radio or one of these other apps that you have. You know what? Give the American people what they expect and they deserve. A choice. Let the consumer dictate what they want in their next vehicle and what they want in their vehicle altogether. But by God, let's not sacrifice public safety for the sake of a political agenda to suppress conservative voices.
Amen to that, Jesse. All right, Kevin's given us that sign. We're going to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a moment for our final segment of this week's show. Stay tuned.
Campfire season's back, and that means s'mores. But when you're at home treating yourself, take them over ice with Dunkin' S'mores Cold Brew Concentrate. And suddenly you're always treating yourself. The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be. Click or tap the banner to shop now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg, and with me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. This is the final segment of this week's show. Jesse, I want to begin this final segment by talking about this new interest rule that the Biden administration is trying to put forward. You know what I call this, Jesse? I call this the Great American Disincentive Program. Or another way of calling it, this is the great attempt to punish the successful and the responsible, to give a benefit and to redistribute wealth to those people who haven't earned it. It's a total inversion of the natural order where you reward hard work, saving, thrift, personal responsibility, and you subsidize those people who are not as responsible or productive or thrifty. So they come up with this rule that if your credit rating is 680 or better, you're going to have to pay a tax, a premium on your mortgage rates to subsidize the people who are less thrifty. So if you and I put a 20% deposit down on a house or an apartment and we buy it, and we're responsible, we pay off every month fine, and we just go through the years and we have a good credit rating, and you get to 680, which is a good number, they wake up one day and say, Chairman Garcia, Judge Weinberg, congratulations, you have a great rating, now you're going to pay more. And Mr. Ishkabibble, your rating is 570, but you have an absolute entitlement to a house, just like Garcia and Weinberg do. And Weinberg and Garcia, they're going to be subsidizing you, so don't worry about it. You have the same right to have a house, even though you're not credit worthy, and you're going to wind up being bankrupt. And that, of course, is going to undermine the banks who loan money to these people who are underfunded and incapable of managing their credit and their obligations. And it brings down the prices of houses, which is bad for the communities. And ultimately, the people who fold, they'll go bankrupt. So why is this a good public policy, Jesse? And why the Biden people insist upon doing this? This is 2008 all over again, where you have this feel-good stuff, you force it down the throat of the American people, and you have a financial disaster, a real calamity. What say you?
When I first read this, number one, I was aghast. Again, it's a situation where we're rewarding people who maybe are not as deserving of the credit rating or of these interest rates because whatever reason it may be. But what we're doing is actually hurting people who are doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing. They're maintaining their household. They're maintaining their household in a manner that they can afford. And now you're using, like you said, the redistribution of that wealth. The second thing that led to me to think about this, it harkened me back to 2008 and the housing collapse of that era. How there were banks that were allowing lending to go on, and the federal government allowed it to continue without checks and balances to give mortgages at an unusual rates and rolling in all these costs. And we knew that the people did not have the wherewithal to pay these mortgages back. And what happened? It created a financial crisis. It created a housing crisis. It created a crisis where our housing went to foreclosures, and it led to tens of thousands of zombie homes left throughout this country, at least specifically in the Long Island region. It hurt property values, it hurt the financial community, and it hurt the people that are trying to run their businesses because now money became scarce because banks did not have the wherewithal to provide funding or capital, or were scared to. And all this because we let lending go awry for individuals that should not have reached that number and maybe should have been given capital or a rate that was more in tune with their financial ability to repay it. The other thing is, isn't it the federal government and the Biden administration's responsibility that interest rates are what they are? They've been jacking interest rates in a way to try and curb inflation. It's actually done neither. It's hurt the housing industry and the housing sales, and it's hurt the ability for people to make their mortgages or to even lend. It's wrong on both ends of this deal.
You know, you have it seems to me, Jesse, and I'm not an economist, but I am a consumer. It seems to me, and I am an investor in terms of my concerns about my pensions and my IRAs, deferred comps. Yeah, I'm just a middle-class person. I'm just trying to do the right thing for my family, and I've saved. And I don't know about the value of your deferred comps or your IRAs or your pension, but since the Biden administration took over, almost 2.5 years ago, the value of all those investments have gone down considerably. The value of the real estate I own has gone down considerably. So as Ronald Reagan famously said, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? The answer is you are not better off. I don't know who's better off, but certainly not the middle class. Who pays for this ultimately? The poor and the middle class pay for this subsidization. This is all ideologically driven. It's not driven by good economic sense, good financial sense. Peter Wallison, who served as counsel to Governor Nelson Rockefeller and then as counsel to Rockefeller again when Rockefeller was vice president of the United States, wrote about this, and he said it was all about ideology, political agendas. It was pushed by the Democrat Congress, Democrat president. It was called the Community Reinvestment Act, and that's what caused, in large measure, the 2008 crisis. And George Bush Jr., unfortunately, went along with some of this forced lending. The government should not be forcing people to lend and penalizing banks when they make a good faith judgment, non-discriminatory judgment, that somebody does not have the financial wherewithal, to use your term, to hold and maintain a mortgage and pay it promptly and responsibly. They shouldn't be doing that. Now, let me switch to something else that's a matter of concern to me. Hospitals. The CDC and a large number of American hospitals are suppressing information on a deadly fungus. It's called Candida auris, A-U-R-U-S, fungus. And the problem with this fungus is it could be a deadly fungus. And the problem with this fungus, if the hospitals do not do an adequate job of sanitation and cleaning up, the operating rooms or the waiting rooms or the emergency care rooms or the recovery rooms, or the equipment that they use when you're in a hospital, or the curtains that when you visit somebody in a hospital room, if they're not cleaned up properly, this can cause this fungus. And this fungus is very, very serious stuff. So you can go in to visit somebody at a hospital or have a routine test taken, and if it's not done properly in terms of the sanitation, the sanitary cleanup, you could pick up this fungus, which could kill you. And this is serious business. And yet, the CDC and the hospitals, you know what they're doing? One, they're suppressing that this is a big phenomenon. And number two, they won't tell you which hospitals are involved where they have the worst records. What do you think about that, Jesse?
It's a threat to public health, and it's a failure of government. And it's actually, honestly, it's a crime, plain and simple. The active suppression of information and not being transparent with public health is in danger or could be compromised is a great threat and is a crime that should be examined and investigated properly. This is something that should not be going on, but are we not surprised? I believe that the American people have lost a lot of confidence in agencies such as the CDC, especially after the COVID situation transpired and the mixed information we received and whatnot. Now we've found out, has been disclosed, that it was less about science and more about policy and philosophy on their part. Someone who should be investigated is Dr. Fauci for the work that he has done to cripple, children's educations and businesses throughout this country. But this is just utterly wrong. And you would think that this is where government should step in, must step in, and would do good thing. But no, it's actually being part and parcel of the cover-up and the crime that's going on. That's going to hurt and injure tens of thousands of Americans and patients when they're most vulnerable. And that's a travesty that needs to be explored, investigated, and those responsible brought to bear.
Well, Jesse, I got that sign from Kevin. I'm going to let you sign off for this because you had some news to report to our Long Island listeners. I just want to let you sign off. I just want to say this has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and give you a report about what happened out in Long Island that you want the people to know.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's happened is that there have been two races that transpired for the 2023 cycle. Kevin LaValle from Brookhaven, he was a councilman. He was elected in January to the town clerk's race by almost 57% of the vote, the Republican there. And then earlier this week, on Tuesday the 25th, a young man, a 36-year-old public servant who has worked in local schools, local libraries, and was a deputy assessor and helped people reduce their taxes. Neil Manzella was elected by 57% of the vote. I want to congratulate those two individuals. I want to congratulate the Suffolk County and the Brookhaven Town Republican Committee, two committees that I serve with, and also, demonstrate that the Republican wave is coming. The best way to do that is to put forward great policies, great candidates, and never stop working. So I want to congratulate that. It looks like it's going to be a good step forward as the 2023 general election comes forward here in Suffolk County and Long Island. And as I've been saying to everyone else, we're just getting started.
Well, let me just add to this. As a House Democrat, I congratulate you and your party. I believe in a two-party system. I don't believe in one-party government. I want to have a strong and vigorous, loyal opposition, and that's the job of the Republican Party. And otherwise, you have dictatorship by a faction in one party. That's what's been going on in Albany and in New York City. For too long, the Democratic Party has been taken over by a left-wing faction, and it's very important that Republicans are successful as a countervailing voice. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We look forward to being with you again next week. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. Thank you.
Let the Record Show is on the air.